Good morning, and thank you for joining us. I'm Alisanda Ventura, the Marketing Manager at Navozyme, and I welcome you to today's webinar, Facilitating the Global Maritime Industry's Voyage to Recovery. For those of you who do not know us, Navozyme is a maritime company that provides technology platform for critical maritime certification processes. We are working on use cases related to port clearance, marine pollution, seafarers training certifications, and ship registry processes with diverse maritime partners like maritime authorities, maritime training institutions, ship owners, and many other organizations. Our work involves the interchange of critical data amongst stakeholders, and that is why we have a great interest in today's discussion and the work that the FAL committee is carrying out. Navozyme launched not long ago the webinar series Navigating in Waves to discuss relevant topics for the sector with maritime leaders. For today's discussion, we have the pleasure to come with Mr. Julian Abril, IMO's Head of Facilitation Section, Maritime Safety Division, and Anjaney Borwankar, Navozyme's Co-founder and Chief Executive. Just a little housekeeping before welcoming our speakers. If you have any questions during the webinar, please type them into the question box in your Zoom panel control. We'll keep an eye on them to bring them up during the Q&A segment. Also, we have an exciting announcement to make, so stay with us until the end of the session to learn more about it. Now, without further delay, I would like to invite Julian Abril and Anjaney Borwankar to begin the session.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Alisanda, and welcome to everyone. Good morning to Europe, and good afternoon to those who are on my side of the world. I'm here in Singapore, and it may be also good evening, for those who are connected from Australia, New Zealand, etc. So a warm welcome to everyone. And these global series, webinar series that we started, the aim is really to raise awareness and to be able to interact and gain some knowledge from keynote speakers. So today we have the pleasure of our guest of honor, Julian Abril. And I'll introduce Julian properly in a moment. But really, Julian, I'd like to first say thank you so much for taking time off your busy schedule to share some insights and knowledge with us about what's happening in IMO. So before I hand it over to Julian, the format will be that Julian will give a keynote. We will then have an interactive conversation, and the members of the public, you are invited to submit your questions through the chat, and we hope to be able to answer a lot of them. So the duration will be, the entire duration is for about 45 minutes. And so we'll be quite precise and to the point. Now, for those of you, and I know from the rich list of people registered, many are interested in the maritime world now, though you may not be directly involved in the maritime world because it's there in the news and it has a big impact on our lives. So for those of you not very familiar with the International Maritime Organization, the IMO, it's an organization which is a body of the United Nations, and it has obviously all the members, about 174 member states. Also, for those not familiar, there are about 140 observer organizations, which could be international government organizations, NGOs, etc. Now, this United Nations body is the highest body in the maritime world, and it functions a little differently from the average United Nations body. It's probably one of the smaller organizations, about 300 odd people. In terms of resources, budget, they're usually in the 30-40 million pound range, which compared to other organizations, if you look at the World Health Organization, could be in billions of dollars, right? So we are talking of a small team, relatively small team of fantastic professionals who are actually curating the supply chain, the logistics, the global trade that's there. So this is, I think, very important to appreciate how much work the IMO staff does. The other thing now is Julian is the head of facilitation and part of the Maritime Safety Division at IMO headquarters in London. Now, for those of you, again, I'll give a brief idea of what is the Facilitation, or FAL as it's called. So this is a convention that is one of the older conventions and one of the most important conventions after SOLAS, right? So it's my research shows that it came in force in 1967, so it's been there for a very long time. And more than 95% of the world's maritime fleet actually has adopted this convention. Now, those of you who studied maritime law may know that it has 16 articles and 7 chapters and numerous instruments. So we won't bore you with all the different details there. But the topic today is really for Julian to give us an update from the inside, from IMO's inside, of things like what's happening at FAL, what's happening at IMO. And again, recently the 45th convention, FAL 45, was held about a month back. So we are very lucky and honored to have Julian Abril with us. And without further ado, I'd like to invite him to give his keynote address, after which we will have a Q&A session with him. So Julian, over to you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Anjaney, for this kind introduction, and thank you also for the opportunity to share with you this early morning in Europe. But thank you very much. And without more introduction, let me start with the presentation. Let me. Do you see the presentation, the first slide?
Yeah, it's perfect.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, as Anjaney has mentioned, my name is Julian Abril. I'm the head of Facilitation section, and I'm working in the Maritime Safety Division. As head of Facilitation, I am the secretary of the Facilitation Committee, that is one of the 5 committees of the organization. And let me gives you a short introduction of IMO, even though Anjaney has made a quite good introduction of IMO and Facilitation. But let me give you some more details. IMO is the unique specialized United Nations agency dedicated to the maritime safety, security, and prevention of pollution from ships. This is a small organization, as mentioned by our chair today. Because we are the secretariat, we are really 265 staff from the regular budget, and this is a multicultural organization. This is an organization that is a centralized organization. If you compare with other UN organizations that have so many regional headquarters and even national headquarters, in our case, our headquarters is in the United Kingdom since 1958. It's in London. We have, even though we have 5 small regional offices, that 3 are in Africa, 1 in Asia, and another one is for the Caribbean. There is also one agreement with the for the Pacific with the regional organization in the Pacific, that is SPC, and we share there one technical officer with SPC. But these regional offices are mainly dedicated to the coordination and liaison of technical cooperation activities of the organization in the member states. The number of member states that are party of IMO is 174, plus 3 associated members. We have more than 140 observer organizations between international governmental organizations and non-governmental organizations. And these non-governmental organizations cover all the spectrum of possible activities of the maritime industry or maritime interest in the world, from Ajax to ship owners to a representative of workers, shipbuilding, equipment, etc. We usually work with 6 official languages, but really we have 3 working languages. And our annual budget is really small if you compare with other organizations. It's around 30 million pounds a year. And let me now speak a bit about the FAL Convention. As mentioned by our chair today, it was adopted in 1965, entered into force in 1967. It was the second convention adopted in the organization because it was very necessary for the member states and for the ships and ship owners to have a common rules for the facilitation and the common ground for the clearance of ships, cargo, and passengers and crew. The number of contracting governments today is 124, and we have also 3 associate members. The scope of application, this convention does not apply to warships or pleasure yachts, and it applies to all ships engaged in international voyages. The structure is 16 articles and 1 annex with 7 chapters. What is really the FAL Convention? The aim of this convention is to simplify and reduce to a minimum the formalities, documentary requirements and procedures on the arrival, stay and departure of ships in international voyages. This instrument contains 2 types of different instruments. These are standards and recommended practices. The standards are obligatory and the recommended practices are recommendations for the member states or the contracting governments to follow in order to have a better system for on facilitation. And also includes documentary requirements and procedures on ships arrival, stay and departure. Let me now, give you some information about what really means the trade facilitation. I'm sure that most of you are aware of this, what this means. As an average, and according with the information of the international organizations, a custom process could involve 20-30 parties and 40 different documentations. This process manage around 200 data elements, and sometimes, not sometimes, very frequently, these data elements are requested repeatedly many times. And according to the OECD documentation and custom requirements, lengthy procedures can increase costs up to 24% of the value of the traded goods. There is also an estimation that from 10 to 14 costs could be reduced with comprehensive trade facilitation reform. Now, let me speak you a bit about what we are doing in the organization in respect to the acceleration of digitalization. I want to mention first what we are doing on the electronic exchange of information, and later I would speak about what we are doing from the Secretariat in order to assist member states to implement the requirements. Since 2019, the FAL Convention requires requires the public authorities to establish electronic exchange of information systems to support the clearance process. This is a big step in respect to the past 40 years. When the FAL Convention was established at the beginning, the main achievement or the main asset was, among others, the agreement to use several FAL forms. It was like a common agreement of which forms should be used in the port clearance. But the maritime industry, the ports, we have been using for many years papers and FAL forms. But since 2019, with the new amendments adopted in 2016, this has been changed, and today all the ports should submit the information related to the FAL Convention, this information for the clearance in electronic format. The amendments adopted in 2016 also recommends the use of the single window concept, in which the data is submitted through a single portal. portal without duplication and distributed to the correct authorities. During this time, the IMO has also developed guidelines for a maritime single window, and it was distributed through this FAL circular that is mentioned in the slide, FAL.5 Circular 42, and the last version is Rev 1 that was adopted last month by the committee at its 45 session. These guidelines were prepared and approved by the member states to support them and their software developers in setting up maritime single window systems. This is from the regulatory perspective, what the committee has approved in the last years. However, what we are doing in order to support member states to help them to implement these new requirements. And I want to mention that for the organization, it's very important the work or the issue of technical cooperation assistance to the member states, because we are doing a very high number of regulations, treaties, more than 50 treaties, hundreds of thousands of codes and guidelines and other type of instruments. And for the maritime administrations, it's very challenging to implement these instruments, and therefore it's really important for the organization to provide assistance through the technical cooperation assistance. And what we did in this during these years is mainly, I want to highlight the project implemented with Norway to implement a maritime single window in Antigua and Barbuda. It is based on the safety net system of Norway, and it was implemented with the idea to implement a very simple single window that complies with the requirements of the convention. And it was implemented in 18 months. It has been very successful, and today it has been extended not only to the FAL Convention, but also there is a connection with the ASICUDA system of Antigua and Barbuda in respect to the customs clearance. This year, we are launching two different projects. One is with thank you for the initiative of Singapore. We are launching with Singapore a project to implement in a pilot country, in a port of medium size, a single window that is based in the single window implemented in Antigua and Barbuda, but is more advanced, more complex because it's for a bigger port. We are just in the first phase of this project, and we are currently selecting the candidate. We have received 12 requests from member states, and we are identifying which country would be the one to implement this pilot project. We are also working with the World Bank to replicate the single window of Antigua and Barbuda, and we are working in Fiji with the World Bank in order to replicate the system in Fiji. And the idea is, if this is successful, we would continue with implementing this single window in other countries. But as I mentioned, this single window is a basic concept, and in particular is of interest for a small island developing states. What we have made this year? This year we have the committee, after some years of discussion, have approved new amendments to the convention. These new amendments will be a new review of revision of the convention, and in particular, what is relevant for the discussions today is that the single window will be an obligatory concept. So far, as I mentioned before, it was a recommendation, and the only obligation was to establish electronic exchange of information. What really meant that one for the member states is that they need to establish electronic systems to forward information, for example, for the clearance of the cargo. This could be implemented through by information submitted by email. This really would comply what the FAL Convention requested in the amendments adopted in 2016. But this year, we go a step forward. The member states have decided to go a step forward and have approved that the single window will be compulsory. What is the timeline of these amendments? The amendments were approved by in 2021, and it will be adopted at the next session of the FAL committee in 2022. That will be the FAL 46, the 46th session of the Facilitation Committee. According with the procedures and also according with the FAL treaty, what is envisaged that this convention would enter into force on the 1st January of 2024. Therefore, this will be a big step forward in respect to digitalization, in respect to the regulatory treaty that is the FAL Convention. Let me also explain you briefly what we are doing in respect to another important instrument that is in the hands of the FAL committee. This is the IMO Compendium on Facilitation and Electronic Business. You can see in the slide a hyperlink that goes to the page with the HTML publication of this IMO compendium. The IMO compendium really is an old instrument. It was adopted in the 1990s, but at that time, really, it was focused only to translate in EDIFACT message the data elements that were included in the FAL forms, and that's all. I mean, that's all the information. The only exception was on security. We also included, or the committee also approved that the security report used the standard Berman. But I mean, the rest, it was EDIFACT. In this case, I mean, what we have made in the last 3 years with the IMO compendium, we have made a big change, a significant change, because instead of focusing on one language, on one standard, on EDIFACT, what we changed completely the format of the compendium, and in partnership with the UNEC, WCO, and ISO, our partners and owners of standards, we have been working to harmonize the respective standards for ship clearance and support electronic shipboard data exchanges. This new compendium, it was planned into phases. The first phase was to include the data elements related to the FAL Convention that were included in the FAL forms. This has been already completed, and now we are expanding to new data sets. At this time, we are including information exchange of logistic and operational port and shipping data and maritime services. I mean, really, the remit of the compendium would be always that it would be related to those instruments. I mean, those IMO instruments that we can translate into electronic messages. And the intention is not to go beyond, and it's not also the intention that this IMO compendium is an standard. This is not the case. What this is a tool to harmonize the different standards. And now let me speak about, I mean, in the last 1 year and a half, as many other organizations, and I mean, like all of you, we have had a big impact with the COVID-19 pandemic. And during these months, we have been working hard trying to assist member states and maritime industry in order that the shipping didn't stop during the pandemic. And our main concerns during the COVID-19 crisis was, in particular, the seafarers. The seafarers has been really dramatically impacted by the COVID-19. They have been suffering because they have had limitation on the crew change and repatriation. And during this year, during these months, we have been working with other UN organizations, the maritime industry and the member states, is to, in particular, to the importance to designate seafarers as key workers in order that they can have better conditions for travel and that the crew changes can be possible. During these months, also, we have been trying to help them in order that they have access to medical care or medical prescriptions, and also paying attention in particular to the mental health and well-being. During these months, and outside the meetings, the regular meetings, because it was not possible to provide this guidance based on the IMO meetings, what we have made is provide technical advice to the member states and the industry through the IMO circular letter 4204 series. We have issued I think it was 41 circulars, and it has been in a very different aspects, trying to assist to the member states and industry. For example, regarding guidance on the certificate of seafarers, guidance on the certificate of ships, to facilitate the crew changes, etc. It has been a huge task made with member states and the industry. The Secretary General approved or established a operational group in the staff that it is called the Seafarers Crisis Team, and we try to continuously provide assistance to the seafarers based on individual cases and using our the diplomatic channels in order that we can assist them to release or to facilitate the crew change, the disembarkation, access to medical care, etc. During these months, we have been also working very closely with the shipping industry and with other UN agencies. You see here in this slide the repository of the COVID-19 information provided by IMO. And it is in this page is also included the information provided by the member states, or all the member states. They have been submitting information, and we have been issuing by means of different circular letters on a very number different of topics. And the last information received is on vaccination, but you can imagine it was also on ship certificates, what to do with the crew, the seafarer certificates that should be renewed, etc. And in the last 2 years, we have also adopted these 2 resolutions. One, it was in the extraordinary session of the Maritime Safety Committee in September last year. It was on recommendation action to facilitate crew change, access to medical care, and seafarer travel during the COVID-19 pandemic. And in May, the Maritime Safety Committee approved a new resolution to paying attention to the prioritization of COVID-19 vaccination of seafarers. The committee also agreed to approve a new module in GISIS, that is our platform that the member state use to provide information and is accessible also to the public. And this module is for information on crew change and repatriation of seafarers. And the committee also adopted at the last session in May, the Maritime Safety Committee, the new version of the industry recommended framework of protocols to ensure the crew changes and travel during the COVID. More information about the seafarers is on this slide. We have had the estimation of the seafarers stranded at sea. In ships in some moments were more than 400,000 of seafarers. A similar number of seafarers were waiting to embark. The situation have improved in the last months, and the estimation of the International Chamber of Shipping these days is around 200,000 seafarers. But it's true that the challenge today is the vaccination of the seafarers. We have information that 82 countries allow the crew changes of the 104 surveyed as provided by the maritime industry. 60 countries have identified the seafarers as key workers. This is very important because if you identify as key workers, this facilitates the movement of the seafarers through the international borders and also for the vaccination of the COVID-19. During this time, the seafarers have been staying for more than 15, even almost 2 years on board the ship, and they have not been able to return home due to the restrictions imposed by the different countries. And finally, I would like to mention here the message of the Secretary General of IMO, Mr. Kitat Lim, in the last conference in Singapore on Future of Shipping conference regarding the digitalization. And he mentioned that we need to utilize the opportunities brought on by digitalization to facilitate frictionless and efficient shipping in support of global trade and across the supply chain. I want also to recall that during the pandemic, really the maritime traffic the shipping has continued working almost as normal in respect to the supply chain. Of course, there has been a decrease due to the impact of the COVID in the different countries, but really the ship have been working during this time. And this has been thank you to all the efforts, and in particular due to the work of the seafarers. And from the organization, we are trying to help them as much as possible. And with that one, I would conclude with my presentation. I'm sorry, but I think I have take longer, Anjaney, on my presentation. But thank you for your attention and for your patience.
Julian, that was fantastic. Actually, you've answered most of the questions I had in your comprehensive presentation. And more exciting here is that you've given us a summary of what happened in FAL 45 with also, what's upcoming in the next year's, for example, the news about the Single Maritime Window, etc. So thank you again here. For those who are listening, also the slides will be available. What Julian shared, he's generously agreed to share that publicly. So please, let us know if you want a copy of that. So we've already got some questions coming in, which I am tracking. Maybe I'll give you a breather and also a warm-up question, if I may say so. Okay, which is probably very easy for you to answer, but not so easy for the outside world to understand. So the IMO consists of so many member states, right? So there's a question here, and my question is along similar lines. So, the FAL, what kind of teeth does it have in implementing the guidelines, etc.? The IMO is a multilateral body, like you've already mentioned. So can you tell us what is the procedure from the time an idea gets presented at IMO till it actually comes in force? And what are the obstacles you see, especially on the digital transformation area?
Okay, thank you for the question. Usually the ideas comes from the member states or the industry. They have new ideas, and there is a procedure to follow, and we are quite rigid in the procedure in order to keep under control the work in the organization. Therefore, for example, the IMO Compendium, the idea to extend to other beyond the FAL Convention, this came from the member states. And after discussion, it was approved, and the technical bodies start to work. Usually, once the work is completed, is approved or adopted by the committees. Depending on the type of instruments, some instruments are adopted by subcommittees, but in the case of the facilitation committee, we don't have any subcommittee behind the committee. But in the case of the Maritime Safety Committee, they have five subcommittees and one subcommittee that is shared with the MEPC. Therefore, depending on what type of instrument, there is a procedure, and at the end, it can be approved by the subcommittee or the committee. And what are the challenges in the implementation? In the case of the facilitation or the single window, we always have the challenge that our business is our customers is not only maritime administration, are different administrations. And this is quite challenging because usually the customers of the IMO meetings are maritime administration, and this is valid for the Maritime Safety Committee because they are discussing on maritime safety or security. In the case of MEPC, that is the Committee on Environment, the customers are Maritime Safety Administration and also Environmental Administration. They are other type of administration and other type of instruments. But in our case, we have immigration, we have customs, we have ports, we have agricultural. I mean, there are many different administration. And for us, it's always a challenge to agree on implement instruments in the facilitation. And in the case of digitalization, really, sometimes the challenge is that we are really on the hands of member states and the industry. And for example, in the case of the blockchain, we are aware that the industry is and some ports, they are doing a very interesting work on blockchain, but we have not had the opportunity to discuss in the organization because we need to wait until some member states make a proposal on, okay, we want to present this idea of, for example, establish guidelines on the harmonization of blockchain, for example. But we need this input from the industry, otherwise, or from the member state. Otherwise, we only can follow with interest the progress. And in the case of technology, always the technology is going much faster than the organization can do, because anything that can appears new on the agenda of the committee, we have a rigid procedure in order to keep the things on track. And therefore, maybe it takes like 2 years before the committee can discuss a new subject. Therefore, but I mean, this is the way that we are working. Also, we have to be aware that IMO is United Nations, and we have in our members very advanced administrations, but at the same time, they are developing countries that they have a very small administration with many limitations due to the budget or human resources, and therefore is complicated to really go fast in a United Nations when you have so different type of customers. It's not like the case of other regional organizations that usually they have a similar type of administration. In our case, the system is rigid because also the member states intend to keep on track the work of the organization.
Yes. So I think it's quite clear here, the work, you have to take everyone into consensus, and that takes time. And of course, here there's a dilemma because in the latest technologies, by the time you finish building a 6-month technology, that technology can be outdated. That is our experience, right? So there's always this challenge of regulation, following technology, and then enforcing and implementing that. So what we have seen in Navozyme is, and we like to, the pandemic, of course, has caused a lot of pain for especially seafarers. But like they say, never let a crisis go waste. So here, can we take that energy that is there, in which digital transformation is now very high on the agenda because of the need, and can we basically find some ways to proceed. So we are doing pilots and implementations in certain ports, with the idea that, at some point there's a critical mass generated and it comes to IMO. So it's not an easy job for any of us, but I think we need to keep pushing. So thanks for sharing your insights. I'll take the four questions actually that have come in, and it'll be good if you can give us a brief response to that. Some of them you've already touched upon. There's a specific question from Dan Armsden on will each member state adopt their preferred single window system, or will the IMO select one single system to be adopted by all member states?
No, it's up to the member states. I mean, I forgot to mention that the organization is small. I mean, we have a big number of customers, 174, more than 100 international organizations, but the staff is very small. And the member states agreed that, the organization does not have any police mandate. It's up to the member state to interpret the conventions or the codes. And what we do in the organization is to establish a common field for all the shipping industry and for all the member states, but it's not our mandate to police that one. In the case of the single window, it's the same. We prepare guidance, but it's really up to the member state to decide how to or which single window to implement. What we are doing is with some donors like Norway or Singapore, is trying to prepare some platforms that can be used in particular by developing countries. For sure, I mean, there are member states that they have a much more advanced single windows, and because they have more complex ports. But what we are doing is trying to provide basic platforms that we recommend, and we try to offer help or assistance to implement these platforms. But it's up to the member states to decide which single window or how to interpret it. For example, what does it mean, electronic exchange of information? It's up to them. I mean, we don't interpret it. What we do is we discuss, we provide the room to discuss, we provide assistance, we agree on the principles and treaties and codes, and it's up to the member state to decide how to implement.
Right. Thanks for clarifying here. I'll take one or two questions. There are many questions coming in, which we won't have time to answer all of them. There's the first question actually came in from Captain Stephen Thomas, and it's a very specific question, which is, you stated that pleasure yachts are excluded, from the FAL Convention, but there's also the commercial yachting industry, which is growing. And the question is really about how can FAL and Navozyme, it said, include these vessels in their work. So of course, for us, we are already working with the super yachting industry, because many of the issues they have around exchange of information, bureaucracy, paperwork, etc., can be reduced with technology, right? I don't know if you have a response from the FAL side on this.
Mm-hmm. Really, if we are speaking about purely pleasure yachts, it's outside the IMO remit. We have very few recommendations or instruments regarding the pleasure yachts because it's outside of our scope.
What about the commercial yachts? So commercial yachts are also there, which is growing.
In the case of facilitation, this would be applicable because it's commercial, therefore it would be applicable. And for example, in the case of the single window implemented in Antigua and Barbuda, this country, this island of the Caribbean is typically is very important, the asset of the tourists, and they have received many big cruise ships, and also they have a very important number of big pleasure yachts. And the single window, it was integrated with the system in order that those that are exploited commercially, they are integrated, and they are integrated in the system in order that it can be cleared by the authorities in Antigua and Barbuda. Therefore, whenever we speak about commercial, it's fine. If it is not commercial, it's outside because it's not our remit.
Got it. Thanks for clarifying. Okay, we are out of time, so I'll just have a concluding question. There are a few other questions here, very interesting questions, you know, on seafarer changes, etc., which you have actually highlighted a bit in your presentation. My last question to you would be really any closing thoughts you have, because there are also questions from younger generation, the next generation. And really, the IMO and people like you, Julian, are always highly regarded. So what would your recommendations be to the next generation, the young generation of maritime professionals, for a career under this current volatile world that we live in?
Okay, thank you for that one. You know, the maritime industry still is the transport. I mean, it's the industry that transport more than 80% of the total volume of goods in the world. And this is not expected to change in the coming years. And I think this is a very fascinating and a very important part of the activities in the world. Therefore, even though sometimes it's not easy, I mean, to change the career at sea, I think it's very fascinating. It's very interesting. And also there are new perspective and new windows that is opening in the last years. But I think I would encourage the young generations to continue working, and because really our work is very relevant, is very attractive. There is many different fields that we can work on, and I think the perspective of the career for the young generations is very attractive.
So thank you, Julian, for that positive note. I think we have to keep our faith and our hopes high. And really the work of FAL in particular is pretty important, because it's like the artery that keeps the global trade functioning. No? So really appreciate the time that you've taken sharing these insights. The questions that we could not answer, I'll share them with you, Julian, and some of them actually are already in your slides. So we'll try to get back to you with a response for the attendees.
That's fine.
But with this, I'd like to just close the session. And any parting words, Julian, before we say bye to you?
No, thank you very much for the opportunity to stay with you today. And I mean, I'm very happy to have shared with you these minutes. And happy, I mean, if you have any other question or we can assist from IMO, we would be happy. Thank you.
Thank you, Julian. I hope to see you in the physical world in London at an appropriate time. So thanks again. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So Elisenda, I would pass it back to you for the exciting announcement that you had at the start. Yeah, so please go ahead. Bye.
Yes, well,
nice seeing you. Bye-bye.
Bye. So, well, thank you very much for connecting with us today. We hope you enjoyed the discussion. And as Anjan said, before we sign off, I have this exciting announcement to make. That is that Navozyme is launching now a knowledge series. The aim of this series is to deep dive into specific topics of interest for the audience. And our first two topics, I can make a small advance. It's that will be artificial intelligence and the economic growth of Philippines. So we will share the details of this next session soon on our social media. So please follow us on our LinkedIn page so you don't miss any of our upcoming events. We hope to see you again next time. And thank you very much for your time and your attention.